When Putin launched the invasion of Ukraine, the plan was simple: a swift military takeover that would hand Russia a massive chunk of new territory. And for a moment, it nearly worked. Russian forces pushed all the way to the outskirts of Kiev before being repelled. Then came overwhelming Western support for Ukraine, and what was supposed to be a quick conquest turned into a prolonged, grinding war. A war that has now passed the 2-year mark. You might think Russia is well positioned for this kind of attrition warfare. It holds the second most powerful military in the world, with seemingly endless reserves of soldiers and equipment. But the reality paints a very different picture. Russia is quietly hemorrhaging its military resources. And if Ukraine can hold on long enough, it may find itself facing an adversary that has burned through nearly everything it has. Duainar tanks. Numbers don't tell the whole story. On paper, Russia dominates in tanks. According to Global Firepower, no other nation on Earth fields more, an estimated 14,077 total, with roughly 10,344 combat ready. That sounds formidable until you examine the math behind the losses. By February 2024, Reuters reported that Russia had lost over 3,000 tanks in Ukraine, equivalent to its entire pre-war active inventory. That works out to approximately 2,500 tanks lost per year. Russia's annual production? Somewhere between 500 and 600. It's replacing barely a third of what it's losing. That gap has forced Russia into increasingly desperate measures. A May 2024 Forbes report revealed that Russia purchased around 2,100 Desert Cross 1-in-10-3 all-terrain vehicles from a Chinese manufacturer in 2023. Despite the impressive name, this vehicle is essentially a heavy-duty golf cart. 1.5 tons, an 85-horsepower engine, zero armor, and no heavy weapons. It was never designed for combat. Yet Russian troops, starved of proper vehicles, have been riding these straight onto the front lines, where Ukrainian drones have made short work of them. In one documented incident, 7 Russian soldiers aboard a Desert Cross were killed in a drone strike, with the entire attack captured on video and uploaded to Telegram. To be fair, Russia's tank situation isn't total collapse, yet. Senior IISS fellow Henry Boyd estimates that between 1,000 and 1,500 tanks were put into service between February 2023 and February 2024. The problem is quality. Only around 200 of those were modern models. The rest were refurbished Soviet-era relics, some dating back to the early post-WWTT period. As Boyd notes, Moscow is trading quality for quantity, and Ukraine's anti-tank systems, like the Javelin, are perfectly designed to exploit exactly that kind of weakness. Shemortries. Armored vehicles. A deadline. Approaching Russia's armored vehicle situation follows a similar trajectory, but with a clearer expiration date. The IISS tracked over 3,000 armored fighting vehicles lost between February 2023 and February 2024, bringing total war losses to around 88,800, a rate of roughly 4,400 per year. Russia produces approximately 4,500 armored vehicles annually, just barely keeping pace. RUSI analysts Nick Reynolds and Jack Watling note that the Kremlin believes it can sustain this rate of attrition through 2025. But there's a major caveat. Around 80% of those new vehicles aren't new at all. They're refurbished Soviet-era models that have been patched up and pushed back out. This approach works for now, but RUSI warns that as the war progresses into 2025, vehicles will require increasingly deeper refurbishment, a process that's slower, costlier, and harder to scale. Their conclusion: Russia will have exhausted most of its available armored vehicle stocks by 2026. Estonia's defense ministry reached the same conclusion through satellite imagery analysis, and both organizations agree on why scaling up production is unrealistic. Western sanctions are cutting off Russia's access to machine tools, high-quality components, and factory equipment. China remains an alternative supplier, but even that pipeline is narrowing. As the U.S. has threatened to extend sanctions to Chinese entities doing business with Russia, major Chinese banks have pulled back, forcing transactions into unofficial channels and cryptocurrency, slowing delivery and compromising quality. Manpower, quality over quantity, becomes a crisis. A senior U.S. Pentagon official stated in February 2024 that Russia had lost approximately 315,000 soldiers in the first 2 years of the war, essentially forcing Moscow to rebuild its entire invading force from scratch. Ukraine puts the number even higher, closer to 400,000. Russia has the population to absorb those losses on paper. Global Firepower estimates 46.4 million Russians are fit for military service, with 1.275 million reaching military age annually. So why is manpower becoming a problem? First, morale. AP News cited Russian outlet Mediazona reporting over 7,300 cases of soldiers going AWOL, a six-fold increase compared to pre-war levels. The activist group Edite Lesum, which helps Russian soldiers desert, saw requests from military personnel jump from just 3% of its caseload in spring 2023 to roughly 30% by January 2024. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Russian civilians are voting with their feet. U.S. Customs encountered over 57,000 Russians attempting to enter the country in 2023, compared to fewer than 300 granted refugee status just the year before. Germany received more than 3 times as many Russian asylum applications in 2023 as in 2022. Second, and perhaps more damaging long-term, is training quality. Former Russian commander Igor Girkin, now imprisoned on extremism charges, stated in early 2024 that Russia's army is light on numbers and likely has no capacity for broad offensives. Putin has already moved to raise the maximum mobilization age to 70 and recall discharge veterans, signs of a military scraping the bottom of its manpower barrel. The training picture is alarming. According to the Institute for the Study of War, a Russian conscript should receive 1 to 2 months of basic training, followed by 3 to 6 months of advanced preparation. In practice, that's not happening. One anonymous soldier, speaking to the Moscow Times in July 2022, said he received just 5 days of training before deployment. A fellow soldier in his unit didn't know how to operate a machine gun. Air power, aging planes, fading pilots. Russia's Air Force, the VKS, entered the war as the second largest in the world. 2,766 combat-ready aircraft. Ukraine claims to have shot down 342 Russian planes and 325 helicopters since the invasion began. Even accounting for potential inflation in those figures, Russia has demonstrably failed to achieve aerial superiority over a country with a fraction of its air power. A March 2024 RAND report adds another layer to the problem. The VKS has burned through its aircraft so aggressively that its total force now sits below 75% of pre-war strength. And it's not just combat losses driving that decline. RAND estimates that 60 additional aircraft will be retired by the end of 2024 simply because they've exceeded their operational lifespans. Russia is only building around 20 new Su-30s, Su-34s, and Su-35s per year, replacing roughly a third of what's aging out, before even accounting for combat losses. Over half of the VKS tactical aircraft are more than 30 years old. Unlike tanks, planes can't simply be patched and sent back. Airframes have finite lifespans, and once reached, those aircraft are gone for good. Pilot quality is also deteriorating. The experienced combat pilots who flew missions in Syria are largely gone. Their replacements are fresh graduates, learning real warfare on the job. Ukraine's Air Force spokesperson Yuri Eknat acknowledged in 2023 that Russia won't run out of pilots numerically, graduating between 100 and 150 annually, but added plainly, it's obvious that the quality of the Russian personnel will diminish. The Navy, losing without a fight. Perhaps nowhere is Russia's military decline more embarrassing than at sea. Ukraine has virtually no navy, just 104 assets, mostly patrol boats. Russia's Black Sea Fleet should have dominated. Instead, by March 2024, Ukraine had destroyed or disabled roughly a third of it. Ukraine's approach has been creative and deadly. French Scalp cruise missiles launched from Su-27s, hitting targets from beyond Russia's defensive range. Unmanned maritime drones like the Maguri V, essentially kamikaze speedboats, have sunk Russian warships with no human cost to Ukraine. The Cesar Kunikov was one such victim, caught on video rolling onto its side and sinking. The incident cost the Black Sea Fleet's admiral his command. Replacing those lost ships is proving nearly impossible. Western sanctions, dating back to Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea and intensifying ever since, have severed Russia's access to German diesel engines and Ukrainian gas turbines. Corruption, underfunding, and structural inefficiency have brought shipbuilding programs to a near standstill. Turkey's closure of the Bosporus Strait means Russia can't even reinforce the Black Sea Fleet from other fleets. The ships it's managing to build in Black Sea shipyards are being targeted by Ukrainian drones during construction, and the ones that do make it into service don't last long. The missile corvette Cyclone entered the Black Sea in July 2023 and was on the seafloor 10 months later. Chapter 1. The bigger picture. Russia is burning through people, planes, ships, tanks, and armored vehicles, all while sanctions choke off its ability to manufacture replacements at the scale needed. Even basic supplies are failing. Soldiers have reportedly been issued rations 7 years past their expiration date, and a BBC report from February 2024 quoted a Western official stating that Russia's domestic ammunition production is currently insufficient for meeting the needs of the conflict. Will Russia have enough to see out this war? Probably, if it ends within the next year or two. But the deeper question is what kind of military Russia will have when the fighting stops. A force so depleted, so reliant on Soviet-era equipment, and so hamstrung by sanctions that rebuilding to anything resembling its former strength could take decades. The clock is ticking, and it may not be ticking in Moscow's favor.